Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're delighted to see this nice audience here on this rainy day, and you're better off being inside. I'm J.C. Argetsinger, president of the International Motor Racing Research Center. Now, I know many of you have been here before, but for those of you who haven't, we are a research library rather than a museum. We have thousands and thousands of manuscripts, original manuscripts of drivers, hundreds and hundreds of films, and probably 30,000 rare photographs. A year or two ago, we were lucky enough to get the National Speed Sport News trove of 75 years of photographs, and we have about 11,000 glossy 8x10s going all the way back to the 30s of mainly oval racing, although there is quite a bit of sports car racing. And we are dedicated to all forms of racing: Formula One, sports cars, Indy cars, sprint cars, oval racing of all kinds. We have a series of programs, mostly monthly, and today is perhaps the biggest one we've had. We're having a morning session right now, and where's Kip? Kip Zeider of our staff who put this together, contacted everyone. This morning is the driver's panel, and I'm going to have Kip introduce everyone. I will give my PBS moment, though. We are a charitable organization. We are an outgrowth of the public library, which for years collected racing material. And in 1998, the 50th anniversary of road racing in America, which started here in Watkins Glen, the motorsports community got together with the public library and built the building where we will be going later this afternoon. And we are funded basically by the public. We don't have any government or major corporation funding, although we certainly would welcome it. But it is people like you who send in their $100 or their $1,000 a year, or some even $2,500, which keeps us going. Right now, I'm going to give a particular commercial. We have a 2015 V6 Camry. That's our raffle car. Now, we got this rather late in the year, and with the curtailment of racing after August because of the repaving of the Watkins Glen track, we haven't sold many tickets. I think we're at about 725. So here's your chance: three for 100 or one for 40, and your chances are going to be 1 in 1,000. And that is one of our main fundraisers. It really is a wonderful car. People say, well, it looks like my sister's Toyota, but it is very fast. It's the car that's the pace car at Watkins Glen and Daytona and other places. It's a V6 and very muscular car. I think Kip has driven it pretty gently, but he'll attest to what a fine car it is. So I hope after this program, and I hope you'll come back at 1 o'clock when we're going to have the second segment, that you'll take a look at the car, come over and ask to see films and photos over at the center across the parking lot. Kip, would you come on up? Kip, you really deserve a round of applause here for putting this together, working diligently to get this wonderful cast.
Thanks, JC. Actually, I want to disagree with JC just briefly. I actually think you can consider us a museum. We've called ourselves at various points in time the Cooperstown of auto racing, and I don't really think that's going out too far on a limb. With the videos that we have, the books that we have, the race programs from tracks literally around the world, DVDs and VHS tapes that number in the thousands. I don't think anybody's ever actually gone through the entire inventory. It's just so large. I have been affiliated with this place for about 3.5 years now. Candidly, it's been the best job I've ever had. And I refer to myself as kind of the token short track guy in this place. And when we brought the Gary Ballou car in yesterday, it was like, yes, yes. We have had some very, very stout cars on display. We are very blessed with that. But I think the Ballou car certainly is one of the best ones we've ever had. So I hope after the guys share thoughts and histories and memories, both good and bad, that you come back to the center, maybe briefly. Actually, you might want to go grab some lunch. We thought we were going to have a hot dog vendor here, but unfortunately that didn't work out. But you've got Burger King and Mr. Chicken literally just a couple minutes away. Maybe go grab a quick bite to eat, but come back at 1 o'clock because we're going to do a history of the place. I've seen excerpts of it. It is killer. It is just fabulous. And I hope you all come back for the afternoon session. I'm going to introduce Joe Murata and Gary Montgomery, and then I'm going to get out of the way. Everybody who has attended a race in Central New York over the last 40-plus years, knows the voice of Joe Murata. Joe announced it all 44 Super Dirt Weeks. Joe announces weekly at Shangri-La, at Oswego, and all over the place. And Gary Montgomery, longtime writer for Gator Racing News, Motor Racing Network commentator. Gary's history doesn't need recounting, in part because I don't know all the history. But so anyway, Gary and Joe are going to introduce our illustrious panel of drivers. As I say, I'm going to get out of the way and just let these guys swap stories and tell memories.
Thank you, Kip. Well, I'm going to tell you, this is really an honor to be up here, and to remember the Moody Mile is just absolutely second to none. And we've got quite a group of drivers here, Gary Montgomery down there on the other end. And, you know, as I started out almost every race here for the past 30 years, I would say, as my good friend Jack Burgess always said, you've got to have a favorite out there. And here are some of my all-time favorites sitting right to the left of me. Mel Lane alongside of me. Mel, of course, who has run at the Moody Mile on many occasions, not only in a small block modified, but also in a big block sprinter, a 410 sprinter. Also alongside of him, guy who has had a great run at the Moody Mile and former Mr. Dirt champion, ladies and gentlemen, Gary Tompkins. Next in line, now this guy is known for, well, he's known for asphalt racing. He's known for dirt racing. He is known for running a super modified, a small block super modified, a super stock on the asphalt. And this year, he had his very first experience of running on the Moody Mile. Danny Kefasinski. Gentleman who needs no introduction at all to the Moody Mile, to dirt track racing, obviously a future Hall of Famer. Ladies and gentlemen, AJ Slideways, Alan Johnson. Now here's a guy next to him. We call it the Moody Mile. And because of this gentleman, on that Labor Day in 1970, when he exceeded 100 miles an hour, ladies and gentlemen, Wes Moody. There have been an awful lot of leaders in history, but the leader of the Moody Mile, dirt car racing, the godfather of the sport, Glenn Donnelly. Another local guy, Ryan out of Waterloo, New York, started his racing at the old Waterloo Speedway. We were talking about it a few minutes ago. Had many runs at the Moody Mile at Syracuse, a very noted chassis builder. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Johnny Byrosh. And the guy who I have shared the mic for many, many years over many different racetracks, both dirt and asphalt. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Montgomery. Well, to get this program underway, we call it the Moody Mile. And I would think the first gentleman that we should call up here on our panel is the guy who we nicknamed the Moody Mile. Wes Moody would like you up here. Oh, you got a mic, don't you?
Yeah, I don't know if it works. Yeah, I guess it works.
Yes, it does. Okay. Well, Wes Moody, do you recall that day on Labor Day afternoon at the then called Syracuse Mile?
Yeah, I certainly do.
Can you recall some of the events that took place on that day?
Yeah, well, we were racing about 4 or 5 nights a week at that time, and we got to Syracuse, and we're trying to figure out what kind of tires to put on, and had a pair of Goodyear tires that somebody gave me. We were all broke, and you know, the deal back in the day. And anyway, we threw those tires on, and Alan just talking about some tires, probably the same set of tires, Alan, that we went out, and oh my God, that thing was fast. We were just blowing them away, and Cagle, you could never beat Cagle at Weedsport and Rolling Wheels, and man, I smoked him that day, and that was the best feeling of my life.
Do you remember, though, when you turned that quick lap?
Oh, I certainly do. I'll never forget it. It's that I still feel it right now.
Also, as you were running that day during the hot lap sessions and actually running your qualifying heat, I understand that your car was pelted by ice cubes down in turn number 3.
Yeah, that good friends of mine, excuse me,
Is it
Richie Evans and Sonny Seaman. They backed their camper up to the third turn, and I was running real hard with Tobias, as I recall, and going into third turn, and felt like bullets hitting my car. I said, what the hell? And come around again, and like bullets hitting it again, and what the heck? And I guess they were both drunk up on the top of their camper, and they were throwing ice cubes at me.
That was quite an eventful day. Gary?
I got a question for Wes. Which car was that? I wasn't there. If I was there that day, I've forgotten. But was that the Stagecoach or a coupe?
That particular time, that was a 57X car that those guys are hitting me with the ice cubes with.
Yeah, but was it a coupe-bodied car or a sedan-bodied car?
No, which one? The
car, the one,
with
the 100 mile an hour.
set track record with?
Yeah.
That was a coupe.
That was a coupe, all right.
Yeah.
I must confess that we've called this thing, Joe and I and other announcers have called it the Moody Mile for years, and that's the reason for it. And I think it was the fellow Dave Wright from Gator News that came up with that nomenclature for the track then. But I always continued to use it because I thought the track had a mood. Sometimes it was moody, sometimes it was good, and but it was the Moody Mile for a couple of reasons, in my opinion. But the real, of course, the source of that, it was you.
Well, actually, Joe Murata and my dad started that same day. My dad and Joe, I don't know which picked up on it first, but that same day, like I say, we were flying high. That was tough to beat Cagle and actually Chamberlain and those guys. Oh my God, they were tough to beat those guys, and we smoked them, man.
Well, here's how it all started. We were in a couple of hour rain delay, and they finally got the cars out there, and people were a little maybe restless in the grandstand. And I said, man, I got to do something to kind of perk this crowd up. So I had the old-fashioned stopwatch, and I knew 36 seconds was 100 miles an hour. So all of a sudden, this little coupe comes flying by, and he went a 35.9. I says, that's over 100 miles an hour. 35.8, that's over 100 miles an hour. So I announce it. Now, there was a gentleman there by the name of John, the scored, John Duvall, who was a official here at Watkins Glen Speedway, a right-hand man to promoter Ira Vale, and he says, Ira, I'm only getting 37-second laps. And Ira said, 100 miles an hour sounds better. Let the kids say it. So then we had a little bit of a break, and I climbed down the stairs and ran into Dave Wright. And Dave Wright said, hey, Wes Moody went over 100 miles an hour. I says, yep. He said, it's now the Moody Mile. I says, really? All right. And so when I got back upstairs, it became the Moody Mile. Does anyone have any questions for Wes Moody? Yes.
Yeah, Wes, I know you run on both the asphalt and the dirt. What did you prefer, asphalt or dirt?
Actually, the day we're running really good on the asphalt and winning, that was the day I liked it the best. And the next time you're on the dirt and we're going like hell, man, I love this dirt.
He sounds like one of those guys that are now running for some kind of an office, right? Yes. We want to talk to the gentleman sitting to the left of Wes Moody. I call him the godfather of the Moody Mile, of the 1 mile track, Super Dirt Series, and Glenn Donnelly. And Glenn, how did it all start? How did it all get together?
Or is that on?
Okay.
Geez, I don't know, Joe. I can just remember I needed an announcer.
Oh, boy.
And you know, there was this guy, he was probably in his late teens, early 20s, was at the Burley Show. Do you guys remember those days when they had the burlesque shows at the State Fair?
Careful, my wife is here.
Joe, how did it go, you know, when you were trying to get him on the inside?
Why, just last week, Mr. Walter Winchell described her as the best undressed woman in show business.
You guys remember that? I don't see too many heads going, but that's how I met Joe Murata. I said, geez, he'd make a great announcer. But on the serious note, every organization, and again, I was in sports all my life, and in particular football, and I went through college on a football scholarship. So I always looked at the NFL, and of course the NFL just started running what they call the Super Bowl. And that kind of triggered a lot what we had to do in 1970 when I got into this racing game. So the Super Bowl was always the best track you could come up with around the area, and at the time it was Syracuse. So I had Weedsport, and a few years later took over Rolling Wheels, and then a few years later Canandaigua, and in the early 80s Middletown. So Syracuse was the perfect place to end the season, and that's when we started in 1972 with Super Dirt Week. After that first year, it was terrible though. Friday night rain, Saturday rain, we did everything on Sunday. Bottom line is I lost about $7,000, but I had a contract with Schaefer Beer for $5,000, and it was for 3 years. So the obligation was there, and that's why we went back and went the second year. It's a good thing we did, because from there on it was what we'd consider in sports a home run. But again, everything that we tried to do was, you know, do it after what they would do in the NFL or any major league sport. Even today, where we're coming into the 21st century in a new era, we're playing with a new surface that we think will be a future for dirt racing. We did it at Rolling Wheels this year, and after 5 events, we think we got it pretty well down. The World of Outlaws come in and set the world's record. Rolling Wheels today is the fastest track in the world, 145 mile an hour on a basically 5/8 mile track, and that's big. Even Syracuse, they couldn't run that speed, you know, on a mile track. So, but the surface really makes the difference. It's where it's tacky, smooth, and I know some of the guys, Gary, Allen, have run on the surface this year. And this is one of the things that I'm kind of looking forward to. And it's not like I come up with this idea myself. The NFL and Major League Baseball, and in particular Major League Baseball, is the people that I'm really copying on this. You know, if you watched a Major League game 10 years ago and it started raining, they'd have to cover the infield. Last year, the Yankees played 17 games right in the rain. And it's the same basic surface we're using. And theirs all comes out of Wisconsin. A lot of stuff starts in Wisconsin. But in particular, that's where their surface. The only trouble is it's real expensive. When you're talking polymers and waxes and the stuff you got to use to mix in with your clay, it gets expensive. Rolling Wheels just on a trial basis here cost us over $400,000. And when we put this track together in Central Square, we'll have well over $1 million in it. But I think that that's the way to go. I think the future of the sport, you know, you got to look at these 16 to 30-year-olds and what they want. You know, now you drive along the side of the road and you see these kids glued to something. Look, they're looking right at it. Wes told me it's cell phones. I don't. But that's what it's come to. Joe, I don't think we want to look in the rear mirror, so that's why I'm starting to talk about what's out front, because we don't allow rear view mirrors in stock cars. We haven't anyway, have we, Alan? I don't know.
Okay, Glenn. Gary, any questions for him?
Well, I would just add that you gave a great introduction, but Glenn is responsible for, as far as I'm concerned, establishing this sport as we know it today and as known it for the last 20 years or whatever it's been. His vision, his crazy ideas, mostly his vision. Then he figured out people to get to work for him to make those visions reality. And there's been a long list of folks that have been involved in that, and I'm delighted to have been part of it over the years. And well, you know, he's created an industry. The cars, I think the way they look, I don't like it, but it's the way it's evolved. And the fact that he had this vision and stuck with it all these years and continues to stick with it is just great. So I really respect him, like him. Used to be his partner. He got mad at me, I got mad at him, but we got over it. And I look forward to his success at the Central New York Raceway Park.
You know, one of the things I'd like to say about Glenn in the conjunction with the Moody Mile, this guy never said never. He was never a quitter. I mean, we were faced on many, many occasions with the worst weather that you could ever see on a radar screen. And one way or another, we would get the show in. You know, I'm going to recall one story when Glenn Donnelly took over Orange County Fair Speedway. And he and I went down on one of the first nights and rode down together and then rode back together. And he said to me, he says, "Well, Joe, what do you think?" I said, "What do I think of what?" He says, "What do you think of all the help and the scorers and the people in the tower?" I said, "Well, Glenn, honest to God," I said, "I think you were a little tough on them. You were really a little rough on him." Well, by the time we got onto Route 17, he was sleeping. We got about halfway up the interstate, or Route 17, and he woke up and he said, "Did you ever play football?" I said, "Yep." He says, "You remember your coach?" He says, "During the game, he was ragging on you all the time. He was just always on your tail. But after the game, he was your best friend." And that was Glenn Donnelly. Glenn was kind of tough. He was up there in the tower. He was a pusher and a mover, but he got the game done, and then he became your best friend again. And I think we owe an awful lot of credit to the Moody Mile to Glenn Donnelly, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to switch around here a little bit. The Moody Mile has been run for, what, Gary, since 1903. Glenn wasn't there, I wasn't there. But I'm going to tell you, there's been so many experiences on the Moody Mile. Danny Kapuzinski, who I introduced earlier, had quite a year this year. Now, he is the PR guy and the social media person up at the Oswego Speedway, and he has run on the asphalt a lot. But one of his goals in life was to run on the Moody Mile. I had him on my radio show the week after. He wrote a very interesting article, and I think because of that, Kip asked him to be here. Danny, can you relate some of the experiences as a first-timer on the Moody Mile?
Well, honestly, I feel kind of goofy being up here sitting in between Alan Johnson and Gary Tompkins. I think I have 40 laps of experience on the mile, but it may have been the most exciting 40 laps I've ever run in my entire life. I started racing at Oswego all the way back in 2001. I was 16 years old. At that time, there weren't a lot of teenagers racing at Oswego. I was a sophomore in high school, but my father built 13 different cars that ran at Oswego, and it was in my blood to always want to go there. He did not like dirt cars, and I think he referred to them as farm implements. I think that's what he called dirt modifieds. He was a super modified guy. But I grew up loving racing of all sorts. My mom went to Rolling Wheels for years with Jimmy and Debbie Winks, and she would take me to Rolling Wheels and watch guys like Alan and Gary and Bob McCready race. And we lived in Columbus, Ohio for about 13 years at one point too, and I remember turning on, I think it was the TNN Sports Cavalcade, and Syracuse would be on, watching Brett Hearn run and all those great races. And so I always knew the mile. Never went to Syracuse until probably 2001 or 2002. It was for a 4th of July race, I think, at the time. And Never really envisioned myself doing any kind of dirt racing, but after I got done with Oswego, we ran super modifieds and small blocks. I went off to college at St. John Fisher, got my degree in communications journalism. Actually ended up working for World Racing Group for a while with Jack Spino and all those guys, Tom Skabinski, and spent some time, moved to Charlotte, came back to work for Oswego. And a gentleman that I raced with at Oswego for a long time, his name's Jason Simmons, owned a bunch of asphalt cars, decided he wanted to go dirt modified racing. He tried it at Fulton once last year, and it didn't really treat him very well, so he offered me the car. He said, well, if you want to take the car, put it in your garage, maintain it, work on it, you can go run anytime you want. So in between running it, we do the Oswego Cartway on Friday nights. I have to be there every Friday, Oswego every Saturday. So I'd go to Weedsport. We went to Canandaigua one night. We went up to Can-Am and had some fun with it. And it was an old Bicknell car that apparently Matt Shepard had ran at Syracuse at one point. But I had no experience with these cars, and I never envisioned taking the car to Syracuse. It wasn't something that, I just didn't feel like we would go there with any kind of ability to run well and be safe. And then the word came down that it was the last race ever to happen at the fair, and like, well, I guess we're going to have to do it. So we put the car together very last minute, a couple days in between. We ran the Outlaw Show at Fulton with the same car, put a body and some shocks on it, and went to Syracuse, and it was just an unreal feeling. It was the closest thing I could relate to being at like the Daytona International Speedway, just showing up for the tech line. I mean, have you guys been there to see the tech at Syracuse? That was my most nerve-wracking part of the entire week. We had a four-wheeler and a piece of rope to pull the car, and I'm next to Tim McCready in line. And I'm not even sure if I hung the body on the car for the first time myself, and they got these templates, and I'm like, oh my God. They're not even gonna let me on the racetrack with this thing, But we made it through, and of 93 cars, we time trialed 14th fastest and ended up finishing 12th in the race. Couldn't believe it. I think my asphalt experience helped a little bit with that. I was talking with Gary earlier. Most of the qualifying and practice we did early in the week, the track was rubbered up pretty well, and it was pretty wide open, which kind of suited me very well. And then come Sunday, it was slippery. A lot more slippery than I was used to dealing with racing super modifieds at Oswego, where you got all the bite and horsepower you could imagine. So, like I said, I don't want to talk forever, but it was the best 40 laps I've ever experienced, and I'm so elated to have been able to experience it, but so devastated at the same time that I'll never get to do it again. So,
Any questions? Gary? Montgomery?
Yes. I have no question for Danny, but I would shift gears if you're ready to shift gears and talk to, okay. Let's talk to the mayor here next to me. Johnny Byrash, named him the mayor of Seneca Falls when he lived there a few years ago and raced and won a lot of races and so forth. And John has some experience on the mile, and as you mentioned earlier, we've got two guys up here with us today that have driven both modifieds and sprint cars. And John, I believe, made 4 starts on the mile in a modified. I'm not sure how many. I don't believe that. I know that for a fact. Do you know that for a fact? Okay. For Super Dirt Week, that is. I've got stats up the zoo from Don and Joanne Davies, and some of you may recognize those names. They are maybe if we shut that one down. Okay, here we go. Anyway, they provide statistics for all of the Super Dirt races, and so they've compiled it, and I've subtracted from that. Found out you had four runs there in Super Dirt Week, but you may have run 4th of July races and Labor Day races as well. But the most interesting thing about all that, I think, is the fact that you've done it both in a modified, probably a small block as well, and a sprint car. And so talk to us about the differences between sprint cars and modifieds on the Moody Mile.
Well, there's quite a bit of difference between them. Sprint cars at Syracuse, you pretty much driving around there wide open. You don't let off the gas, and it's quite a ride. Takes you a while when you first go out there in a sprint car to figure out that that's what you have to do. You have to talk yourself into leaving it wide open. And once you do, then you're getting around there pretty good. The modifieds, yeah, we didn't race there a lot, but we did run there a few times and ran pretty good a couple times. Got wrecked a couple times. Our best race there was a 4th of July. We ran a small block against the big blocks, and we won the heat and we started fifth in the feature and finished fifth. And that was our best finish that we had at Syracuse. But it was quite a play. Even in modifieds, it's quite a ride around that place when you're used to running, half-mile tracks and 3/8 mile tracks, and you go there, and it's really different. It's quite an experience. Everybody that ever got to race at Syracuse, I'm sure they're glad right now that they did. Seeing that it's going to be going away here, so it was a great experience.
I call it the greatest spectacle on dirt, and I think that is the case. The quality of the racing isn't always great, but it is a spectacle for sure. I must confess that I don't remember too much of your winning and having good runs on the mile, but I do remember a day very specifically. You and I were standing at the start-finish line when the red flag was out after a multi-car crash, and we were surveying the damage, and that was a sprint car at that time. And I think the answer was it wasn't damaged, and I think you fired up and kept going.
Yeah, we could have. One time, we fired up and kept going. We were in 2 wrecks up there. The last time I ran a sprint car there, on the original start, there was, I can't remember how many cars they started in the feature, but we started 16th. A lot. And we started 16th, and they started wrecking in like 3rd or 4th place. And boy, we really got tore up. That was the only time in my whole racing career, 28 years, that I went to the hospital. And but other than that, that place was fast. There's no question about it.
It was fast, exciting, and guys like you and Wes and the rest of the drivers down the line here that have had the experience of doing that, I just marvel at the fact that it can be done, that there's a man alive or a woman that will do that. We must complete this resume on the mayor here, though. He moved from Seneca Falls to Penn Yan, and he now builds hot rods and street rods and that sort of thing. And so we're honored to have the mayor of Seneca Falls, now the mayor of Penn Yan, with us here today. So questions for Johnny Vairaj.
I have a question for him. John, you were noted as a chassis builder as well as a driver. When you were putting together chassis and building chassis, did you do anything special for a Syracuse chassis? Were they designed in any different way?
Well, the only car that we ever built different for Syracuse is one for Lynn Huff. We built once that was quite a bit different, and but other than that, usually just the sheet metal, and the body work was different. And 2 of these guys sitting on the stage here used to work for me doing sheet metal. Actually, they had my cars at different times too. Gary and Alan both, and. Gary, when he first started working for me, he was just doing odds and ends around the shop. He was like 16, 17, and we were building a car for Syracuse, and we had some ideas for the design of the front end and the hood, and it's hard to, it's easy to put it on paper. It's hard to make it reality. And I handed Gary a picture and said, you got to build this front end for this car. And he wasn't very old, and he never did much sheet metal work or anything, and he just whipped that thing out and was perfect. And he's been doing it ever since. So, but the body work on the cars is really, as you can see on the 112 over here, the body work really makes a difference at Syracuse because of the speeds.
Any other questions? Gary, would you like to continue?
Sure. Go on down the line here. Is that what you want to do, Joe? I'm helping out, remember? Okay. Well, since we've already talked to about Gary Tompkins here just a second ago, Johnny did, let's go to Gary Tompkins. Gary is a very talented driver, as you all know, earned the Hard Charger Award, I believe, for his, I think, 7th place finish last month or so. I followed his racing career, I think, from the beginning, very early on at any rate, when he ran what we called I think we call them street stocks, or I'm not sure what we call them actually back. Amateur cars, probably amateur cars at Canandaigua, and he ran a Mopar, the Dodge Challenger, I think it was, or maybe a Plymouth Barracuda or something like that.
You know what he tore up?
Yeah, well, yeah, he and a lot of other guys tore up a lot of really valuable cars. But nonetheless, that's where he started, and he most recently raced last weekend down at Charlotte. So with that, we'll turn it over to Gary Tompkins, and he can tell us about some of his racing experiences. Gary started at the beginning. We know you were a tin knocker, and you are a tin knocker, and that's another chapter. So maybe you can talk about both, first as a driver and then as a tin knocker and worker around Troyer and Bayrush and so forth. So you're up, Gary.
Okay. I started working for John right after I graduated high school. I was going to, CCFL back then, now it's FLCC. And we were looking for a part-time job. Bill Trout actually got me hooked up with Johnny. I knew Johnny because Johnny put the roll cage in my mint 1970 Dodge Challenger RT Plum Crazy car. But I started doing odds and ends around there. And at that time, Mike McLaughlin, dropping some names here, was working for Johnny building bodies. That was right when Mike was really starting to move up through the ladder. And I started helping out John on his cars. And, of course, racing, you bend up some body panels. He always made me straighten them out. Started making patches and this and that. And I'd always loved to I used to build little models when I was a kid and stuff and make bodies out of cardboard and stuff like that. So I always wanted to do something like that. I just never thought I'd be a tinsmith. But then he started to have me do more and more, and in the winter of 1986, John and I both went up to Troyers and worked for a while. Of course, he decided he didn't want to stay there, but I did for 10 years. So, but I still work for John. So, it was fun because I work at Troyers during the day, and everything's got to be a certain way, and they got to have designs and stuff like that. And I go out to Johnny's, and all his body's work was just simple, straight. Let's get it on the car. It looked good, but it just wasn't as exotic as what Troyers was. It was fun, building stuff in a horse barn and going out there and beating the big boys. So I also, when I worked at Troyers, the year, I think it was 89, Alan, you started last and won? Yeah. Well, I built the body for that car, and part of the body was falling off, and all I could think of was that body's going to fall off, they're going to get black flag, and they're going to blame me. But fortunately, that didn't happen. Fortunately, he won, but yeah, I've got a lot of bodies that went through, won some races up there. Actually, if you go to the Dirt Museum over in Wheatsport, the Phil Taylor #1 car, the asphalt modified car, dirt asphalt modified car, I built the body for that. That was a pretty special thing too. But I always wanted to be a driver ever since I was a little kid. My dad used to take me to all these racetracks. I said, man, I can't wait to be able to race cars someday. And one of my favorite times of the year was going to Syracuse, sitting up in the stands, just watching those guys go around that track. It was such an experience. It was such exhilarating, just watching them cars go around that track, the speeds they were going. One of my favorite races that I wasn't involved in was the year that 1979 when Jack Johnson won, because finally a New Yorker won that race. Because all PA and New Jersey guys were always winning that race. But I always wanted to drive there, and I actually, when we started racing Sportsman, they actually had us have like an invitational to go up there, and we got our car ready to go up there, and I couldn't wait, and we get on the track, and I ended up having motor problems, and we make a lap, so that was heartbreaking. But I don't remember my very first time around the track. I know I was probably nervous. I can't say I was ever scared about that place, but you really had to give that place a lot of respect. Because if you messed up, you were going to wreck, and you're going to wreck hard. I mean, I know Alan can attest to that, and John too. I was very fortunate. I've never wrecked hard there. I've wrecked there, but not very hard. But the speed there, it does take a lap or two, even a modified, to get used to the speed. Now, we're inside these cars, and they make noise. We can hear them. But the noise is always a little different at the end of the front stretch, especially going into turn one there compared to what you're used to on a short track. Just everything is vibrating a little different than the motor sounds a little different. Just the fact that you're going so fast and then you're trying to race side by side with somebody or wheel to wheel. Now, obviously, over the years, people say, "Oh, you can't pass there," but And for a while, it was tough. This past year, though, we started 36, and we got 7th, and we passed the majority of the cars because that's just the way the track was. But obviously, I've got 2 seconds there. I'm 100 feet away from 2 wins. Vic Coffey beat me there in 2002. That was the year they got rain delayed. And then on lap 120, they had a red flag. And I was talking to my crew on the radio, and they were making fuel calculations and said, we're not going to make it. So we came in and put fuel in it. Well, we put a little too much fuel in it because Vic Coffey came in and put a little less in, and he beat us out. And I couldn't beat him. I followed him around, and I think Alan is even ahead of us that year too, and he ran out of gas along with about 8 or 10 other guys, and we ended up finishing second to Vic Coffey that year. 2004 is our other time we got second there. That was the year that we were going for Mr. Dirt. Again, I was driving for Jim Beachy that year. We had a fast car all week, probably the fastest car there, but I started outside pole in the feature because we had a very good first lap in time trials, and then the driver tried to be a hero a second lap and almost stuck on the third turn wall. So we were running up front all day, and we were fighting Brett Hearn for Mr. Dirt, and we sort of had to be near him all day to make sure the points didn't change much. And I still remember the vision of him getting pushed down the cinder track in a backstretch by a tow truck, and I said, well, he's out of the race. And the call coming over the radio, you can't race hard anymore, you got to relax and drive around and finish this race. So they let me race the last 5 laps. I caught up to Tim Fuller, who was running second. Kenny Tremont was running first, running the lead. Kenny ran out of gas coming out of turn 2. Tim went out around him, I went underneath him, and I spun my tires a little bit. Timmy beat me to turn 3, and I followed him across the line. So the other thing too, and this isn't well known, Glenn used to have an award called the Maury Holbrook Award. I don't know if Joe remembers Maury Holbrook.
I sure do.
Yeah, he used to do the track surface there, the track prep, and it was the fastest time of the week. And it's funny, Wes is talking about going 36 seconds. Well, we won it in 2005, and we did it in practice, and I still remember the lap. We went 28.111. Obviously, it's not a track record because it wasn't an official lap in qualifying, but I just remember that lap because I was 15 car lengths behind Billy Decker, who was 15 car lengths behind another guy, and it was sort of like a draft all around the track. I'd never had a car feel like that around there. It's just we were fast that week, but we weren't that fast, and it was a special lap. It just one of the things you think about it afterwards, like, holy cow, the car was that fast. You think about, we raced this year during Sunday at 35-second laps, and that year we were that fast because the track was that good and the cars were that good. But I always say Syracuse is one of those places where I love to drive around, but I hate to race around it just because it can be so frustrating. You're always on the edge, and if you mess up, you're going to pay for it.
Gary?
Not this year. Actually, the last few years, in 2012, they actually put clay on the track, and that did away with a lot of the cinders. Actually, Dan talked about this year going there with the car he ran at Fulton. Well, we ran to 2012 with our car, and we got the bright idea right after Fulton, hey, let's go to Syracuse. So we put a new body on it, changed motors, went up to Syracuse, time trial 6th fastest. Well, the reason why we time trial 6th fastest is because you couldn't step on the gas. And you were hunting for bite. That was the year that Brett Hearn won. They actually got rained out just after halfway, but we were literally running up by the wall all the way around the track at times just trying to find bite. This past year, on Sunday, the track had slicked up a lot. There was a hole in the bottom of turn 1. You could drive through it, but it really messed your car up. And of course, you don't want to break your car. But if you went around it, you had to either slow down, go to the bottom, or just let the car drift. And like I was telling some guys earlier, by the end of the day, we were almost at the wall coming out of turn 2, and we were actually at the wall going into turn 3 too, just trying to find bite. So, and we were running 35-second laps, which when you're going that slow, you can drive different places on the track to try to find bite. You're not trying to drive the track like an asphalt track. You can drive it more like a regular dirt track when it's like that.
I marvel at the fact that you can remember all that stuff, all those laps. I'd like to back you up, and I know we don't look in the rearview mirror, but You talked about building model cars and always wanting to be a racer and going with your dad and mom to watch the races and so forth. And then you did eventually get that Charger RT, I guess, or Challenger.
Challenger.
Not even a simple one, but an expensive one. But anyway, when did you decide that you could become a race car driver and would stick with it? And I suspect you never imagined where you'd end up, but just continue racing.
Ever since, my dad he's got the gift of gab, and he always talked to the guys that were from Canada and, Buffalo Way, Cliff Norton, Terry Edwards, Lloyd Holt, Mikey Grant, and those guys. I'd wake up on Saturday and Sunday mornings with race cars in my driveway, and man, they still were dirty. They still had them. You could actually, sometimes they were still warm, and just looking at them, man, I want to drive these things. And I have been very fortunate. I've had to scratch and claw. I've except for when I drove for Mitsubishi, and a couple other times too. I've never really had a big sponsor. We've had to scratch and claw for what we've got. But I've always, ever since I can remember, I've been wanting to drive a race car, and particularly dirt modified. Now, back when I was racing street stocks, I had the notion I really wanted to drive a sprint car, but one day my dad told me he wouldn't walk across the street to see a sprint car race, and he was a great influence on my racing career, so I knew where that was headed. It wasn't going to be a sprint car, so.
Any questions for Gary? Gary Tompkins, that is. If not, Joe, you want to keep going, or?
Sure. Mel Lane has been sitting here very patiently, and Mel has had quite a few experiences at Syracuse. Now, the unique thing about him, not only did he run a small block modified at Syracuse, but he also ran a sprinter. I'd like to have you talk about the difference of competing on the Moody Mile with the two different cars.
Well, there's quite a difference with the sprint car being so much lighter and more power than the small block modifieds. But the modifieds were great back in the early 80s. I went 4 times and with a low budget car, and I did win a heat one year and finished 8th in the final. That was my best, with that car. And then when we went back entered with the World of Outlaws in 90 or 91, and I ended up 11th in the A main feature. Sammy Swindell won it, and I ended up 11th on the lead lap, and it was really successful. The car got more comfortable as the race went on, and it was very fast, but try to not do anything crazy. So.
Positioning on the racetrack, between running a modified on the racetrack, and I'm talking here again strictly the Moody Mile, different lanes, different grooves, different places you get into it, get off of it, the differences?
Well, with a sprint car with a wing on it, it was like Johnny Byros mentioned. When you get the car right, you don't have to lift off the throttle. You can the wing will just hold you right down onto the track. And
so you would go full throttle around that mile?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and that's a tremendous feeling. To be able to have the car work that good to do that, and so it's exciting.
And then running a small block modified, obviously different lanes that you would use, and you would get onto it at a different point, shut it off at a different point.
Yeah, and with the modified, we never build a special car or had the money to spend to do it proper. So it was more of a field filler. We did good on the short tracks, but the mile was tough.
The experience of running the mile, and I'm sure every one of these fellows that are seated alongside of me here, is just phenomenal. Danny Kaye kind of summed it up. For him, it was like running at Daytona. You also feel that way?
Yeah, I raced on 42 different dirt tracks, and it certainly is the fastest and most unique feeling of racing there.
Well, you sure did a great job. Thank you. Any questions from Mel Lane?
I have.
Right there.
Well, the sprint cars are a little quicker because they're lighter and, they have similar horsepower. And I think Billy Punch holds the record there at 24 point some seconds on the mile. And then we did go back, I didn't mention it, but I went back as an owner and had Lance Young drive for me in a URC ESS challenge, and we ended up winning that race. And the Lance was the same way. We had a car built special for that, and it just worked very, very good. And we averaged like 127 mile an hour for the whole race, and could run it absolutely wide open. So that was a good experience too.
I'd like Mel to comment on the Syracuse. The mile isn't known as a sprint car track. Eldora is known as the sprint car track around these parts, around the world probably. You've run a 410 Sprinter at both tracks. Talk to us about the difference between Eldora and Syracuse.
Well, I have not run at Eldora. I run at Knoxville, Iowa.
I'm sorry, I meant Knoxville. That's
Right,
what I really meant.
Knoxville. That is an excellent track. It's it's a big half mile, so the speeds aren't quite as great, but it's the same deal. I mean, the first year that we went there was 164 cars that took time trial. So I mean, it's a huge big deal. It's not quite that large anymore in car count, but that's a great adventure to go to. But it's different than Syracuse. Syracuse is just, we'd slow the steering down to try to make the car not jerky at all compared to the short tracks, and so just quite a bit of difference, but both huge events. Yep.
Any other questions? Well, that leaves us with one driver. He's a three-time winner at Syracuse, many-time track champion at many, many different dirt speedways around the Northeast. I remember this guy winning his first modified feature in the Tom Ewing Corvair-bodied car number 14J, and that was at Canandaigua Speedway. Alan, it's been one hell of a ride, hasn't it?
Yeah, Joe, it's been since 1974.
1974. And of course, your success at Syracuse has been second to none. You've seemed to have done well both on the short tracks, the medium-sized tracks, but you've also done well at the mile at Syracuse. Can you relate some of the Syracuse stories?
Well, I've been there enough times. I've been there since 74, so let's say 40 times or so. So, I've had some good runs, but I've had some pretty bad ones too. Mostly I remember the wrecks more than you remember the wins. But the track's gone through a lot of transitions since 74. It seems like every time you go there, it's different. Like Gary says, you're there one time, it's 28 seconds a lap. And then you're there a couple days later, and it's 35 seconds a lap. 35 seconds a lap. And it's just a challenging place. You try to go up there with good equipment, but it's kind of hard to find an owner that can spend that kind of money for one race. But I've been lucky. I've been probably 4 or 5 times where I've been there, and I was probably in, if not the fastest, one of the fastest cars. All the rest of the times I wasn't. But it's kind of a race where just survival and having the right pit strategy and not running out of gas, and you're going to be successful there, and a lot of luck.
Alan, can you recall the year that you had to run the non-qualifiers race on Sunday afternoon, and you had to qualify through the non-qualifiers race, and I think you started in the 55th starting position, if I'm not mistaken, and came up and won it. Can you give us some experience on that day?
Well, that's going back to the luck factor. No, but we were pretty good. Going back to that week. We unloaded. We were okay. We were a mid-pack car, maybe however many cars used to get back then. I think maybe 80 or 100, whatever they used to get. We were probably 35th fastest on the charts. But we had a problem with the car where it was popping out of gear all week long. And I had the transmission apart in my own trailer trying to fix it. I didn't know a transmission part from a rear end part. So, we struggled with it all week, trying to get it fixed, and never did get it fixed. So that put us in a non-qualifiers race. And then we were a little off on setup. Like I said, we were probably half as fast as anybody there, about mid-pack runner. And we threw a setup at it Saturday night. I borrowed some shocks from Kenny Tremont and threw a setup at it. completely off the wall compared to, you know, like something you just Troyer would set you up with. And went out there, and we started pretty far back in the qualifiers race too. And the car was just awesome. I mean, I got out there, and I was passing a car a lap, you know, and it was just great. But I thought I was going to run out of time, and I got up to the last lap, and I still remember following. It was Mark Fleury following me around, and I knew I was better, but it's so hard to pass there, and I didn't think I was going to be able to do it, and I just gave it everything I got coming out of 4, got up alongside of him, and you know, it's questionable if it was a tie or not, but I figured Glenn still had his provision. I figured Glenn still had his provisional, so I wasn't really worried about it. But anyways, they called it a tie, and we got in the race, and I ended up missing the driver's meeting because they had the driver's meeting while the non-qualifiers race was out there. So I started last, like you said, and you know, I was doing all right, working up through. Like I said, I had a really fast car. We threw a setup at it that was just, you know, it was just great. It was super fast. And, you know, I got up to, the race was going on. I got up to people were pitting and not pitting. And I was up to 5th. And I'm trying to get my spot on the yellow. And the guy's not letting me there. He's fighting with me. And he's a lap car. So he's not letting me in there. So Glenn's getting tired of the cars going around in continuous yellow. So I didn't know I was supposed to go to the outside, running 5th. I thought I was supposed to start 5th, but I was actually supposed to be the 5th in line on the outside. And I didn't know it. So back then, I don't think communication was that great on the radios. I don't even think we had a radio, to tell you the truth. But Glenn was getting tired of running the cars around under the yellow, I guess. So he put me last. Still got a bone. Still got a bone to pick with him about that. But anyways, so I went last. I didn't know what was going on. I went where they told me to go. So I worked my way back up. By the end of the race, I was 3rd again. And you know, that was a year when my brother and Frank Cozy was kind of fighting for the same piece of real estate going into one. And I'm the one that ended up with it. They both ended up in the wall. So, you know, it was just a matter after that. I think there was 5 or 6 laps left or whatever. Had a tire going down. Gary's body was falling off of it. No fault to him. He didn't put it on. But, yeah, we ended, you know, that's pretty much the way the race went. We ended up winning it.
That was fantastic. Alan, you drove for many different teams. One of the teams that you drove for that really impressed me was the Jim Beachy Pillsbury team. I've seen many introductions and many different ways that drivers brought their cars out onto the speedway during the big race, the 200 on Sunday. But I think second to none was the time that you guys brought the Pillsbury Doughboy car out onto the speedway. Every one of the crew was dressed up in a Pillsbury-type uniform, the big flat hats and the big puffy hands. And as they pushed the car out onto the track, everybody waved at the audience. And I think that was one of the greatest introductions that anyone has ever done at the Moody Mile. And you were part of that, and thank you for that. I'll always remember that.
Well, I don't know if I was part of that. I was walking about 50 foot behind the car when they were pushing it on there. I got in it after they all left. But I thought that was kind of,
I think I heard a yell from the tower. I think I heard Glenn saying, "Where's the driver?"
Yes, Beachy was wondering that too, but I couldn't quite work up the courage to put the hat on, so I kind of snuck in after that was all over with.
Gary?
Well, Beachy was probably the most colorful car owner that you drove for. You've driven for many. But let's go back to the beginning, and the very beginning, and Tom Ewing and the guys from Victor. And the story that I have heard, and I believe it to be true, is that you were probably, I don't know if you were 14, 15, whatever you were, but you had never driven a standard transmission. I don't know if you didn't have a driver's license, so you hadn't driven on the road at all. Never driven a standard transmission car around the fields or anything. So they had you out in the parking lot, I think at Weedsport, someplace or other, teaching you how to drive and shift a car. Is that about right?
That's not quite a true story because I don't know where that story came from, but my dad used to have Jeeps. We used to have he had 117 acres of property out in Middlesex, and he used to have Army Jeeps when we were kids. And he had trails all over the place. And they have the standard transmission in them. And I learned to drive standard probably when I was 10, 12 years old.
Okay, I'll never share that story again then. I can attest to the 178 acres out
What
there.
else you got, Gary? I got to straighten you out.
Yeah, we're going to straighten a few things out here before this day is over between you and I, but I'll go back to, you talked about remembering a crash at Syracuse, and I remember one very well. I don't know what year it was, but Joe and I were in the tower, and you crashed in turn 1 into the wall. I think at full speed, I don't know. I couldn't believe that you wouldn't be hurt. And the word came over the radio that the driver was okay, and I went back over the radio, are you sure you got the right driver? And they were sure, and you were okay. But that was, as I recall, a wicked, vicious crash. And I don't know what year it was, but it was turn 1. You probably do remember.
Yeah, I actually broke a helmet in that crash. And looking at where the roll bar was and where my head was, I'm kind of thinking my neck had to stretch 4 or 5 inches to hit that roll bar. And it knocked me out of stars. I remember Dick Larkin and I were trying to get into one, and I guess he had a wheel underneath me, and I didn't know it, and sent me right up into the wall. And yeah, that was one of the bad ones.
That was a bad one. But we mentioned this briefly, but I have, as I mentioned earlier, I have statistics from Don and Joanne Davies, and that show that Alan, and this is just again for the what we now know as the Syracuse 200, 36 starts, 3 wins. 83, 89, and 03. So a 20-year spread between those two, and you won't get to do it again, but it was a great run while it lasted. I mean on the Syracuse Mile, that is.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of years. You know, it's hard to believe, 40-something years. I know I missed a few because I didn't have rides for them, but it's just a lot of work. You know, I can still remember burning the midnight oil to try to get the cars ready for that week, and you know, at John's trying to get, I had 1 or 2 of his cars there before, and being in his garage till midnight, just, you know, always seemed like it come up and there wasn't enough time to get the cars ready, you know, because we'd race, who knows how many races up till then, you know, just one race at a time, trying to keep the car going for the next night, and then Syracuse would come, and, you know, we about as unprepared as we could be, but, you know, we burned the midnight oil, and we always made it. And I'm kind of thinking maybe with Glenn here, we could start another 40 years. I don't know how many years we'll make, but we can always try.
Any questions for AJ Slideways, Alan Johnson? I guess I'll get you off the hook, Alan.
Any questions for any of the group that is up here with us right now? Go ahead.
I'd like to know how much time is spent in the garage, in the off-season. How much time, like now, when they start, like working, it's always interesting because actually the off-season is short, but how much time will be being spent, working directly with the cars?
Gary?
I was at Bicknell Racing Products yesterday, and they sent 11 cars out of there yesterday. And they were supposed to send, not yesterday, Thursday, and another 3 or 4 on Friday. There's parts probably come up this coming weekend, and there are going to be a lot of guys who want their cars in. They started building the 2016s, I think, in September. So, and right now, if you order a car from Bicknell, it won't be until March you can pick it up. I don't know how the other car builders are, but I know they're that busy. But it's pretty much a year-round thing now. It's just to stay on top of the game, you really got to be going the whole time trying to get ready for, whether it be the next race or the next season. You cannot really slow down a whole lot. It just go all the time.
I have a question for either Alan or Gary or anyone, Johnny. You often heard of a regular Saturday night special and then your Syracuse car. Did any of you ever have just a car put away for Syracuse?
When I drove for Honeywell in 2002, we bought a Syracuse Pacific car. The frame was basically the same. Mostly the difference, Alan actually had one when he drove for Beachy too. The front sheet metal, the front end was closed off a lot more, ductwork to the radiator. The front wings went all the way down to the frame. The doors were different heights. just a lot of different stuff to make the air not only go through the car straighter, but also put the downforce in a different area because, you're on a mile that's almost like asphalt, so you can do a lot more of that stuff. We'd get done with it. Now, back then, when we got it, they actually still raced Labor Day, which unfortunately they...
Was that a good testing
Yeah, it was.
for Super Dirt Week?
Yeah, because our first race was Labor Day with that car, and we got fourth with it, and we didn't have the motor that the guys in front of us had, but we were way better through the corners than any of those guys in front of us. We just couldn't pass them. And Labor Day, even 4th of July, the track is really narrow, the groove is. But we learned, okay, we got something here, so we went through it again for Super Dirt Week. Super Dirt Week ended, we take all the running gear off the car, put the frame and body over in the corner, put the running gear on another car, run the short tracks with that, buy all new running gear for that car for Syracuse again next year. We did that. I left Honeyway in 2008 or 2009. They still had the car, and they're still doing the same thing.
Johnny Byrash, how about you? Did you have anything special for Syracuse?
Yeah, we used to have a car, try to build a car special for Syracuse. We didn't run there much ourselves, but for different guys, different customers, we'd try to build a car especially for Syracuse. And like I say, usually for the sheet metal work, and usually it was at the last minute. One time we ran Syracuse, we started a brand new car 10 days before Syracuse. And that meant that was just straight tubing in the tubing rack. And then 10 days later, we went to Syracuse, and that car was really fast, and it was the best I never qualified very good there. I never ran many races that they time trialed, and I qualified 10th, and I remember the day of the race, we went out for final practice, and I drove right around Jack Johnson like he was parked, and we were starting right next to each other, and Jack told me before the race, he says, if you don't mess up, you're going to win this thing. And we went like 12 laps and broke oil pump in the motor, and that was the end of it. But that was a special car for Syracuse, and Gary, that was when Gary started working for me. He built the body for that car, the nose and the hood and everything, and that car was really, really good in the wind. I know these guys that drive those cars up there, you get a lot of buffeting. Your helmet, your head, and everything moves around, especially when you're passing cars. And that car, the way the sheet metal was on it, when you drove down the straightaways, it was just like sitting in your regular road car. It was the sheet metal was perfect on that car, and so the body work really does make a difference at that racetrack. And one other time we built a special car for Lynn Huff up there, and that car was really good. That was the same way. We built it 2 nights before Syracuse. We were out back of the shop painting the frame with spray cans at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that car was really fast. He ended up having a water pump failure, but then the following year he had a small block in the car and won the small block race with that car at Syracuse.
One more thing about John. The year before we built that car, that was the white car, right? That was the white car?
That was a white car, yeah.
We built the car called the Circus Wagon. Yeah. That was the car that was the car that wrecked when Sammy Swindell tried to make a lane underneath Johnny coming out of 4, and there was no lane, and it wrecked them both, and then poor Buzzy come along and crushed them both. Now, that car there was the corn husk car at Weedsport the following year when he had the race won.
Oh, yeah, that Johnny did some harvesting.
Did some farming.
I remember that.
So, yeah, but that car was fast that year, too. I really felt good without that car. But, yeah, the year that we built that car, now this, one thing about this stuff, I don't remember who, Rod Eisenberg was one guy.
And then we had an engineer from Bill
Cornell.
Trout, had a aerodynamicist from Cornell University come up to the shop, and we went over a lot of little things on the car. And some of it was stretching the rules, but what he had us do was, he says, now look, this guy was really smart. He says, you gotta do some things that are blatantly illegal so that they make you change them when you go through tech. And so
make them feel good.
he'd make us, he had us make the lips a little bit too long, and they'd measure it and go, well, you can't have it like that. You got to cut it off. Okay, we'll cut that off. And he says, maybe some of the other stuff they won't see. They'll pay attention to that. And so that's what we did. We put a lot of work into those cars for Syracuse.
John, I got a question for you. When you were in that one car that was pretty fast that you went around Jack Johnson and so on, was that Ford powered?
Yeah, that was Ford powered, yeah.
You always kind of stuck to the Fords.
Yeah. When I drove for Billy, we ran Fords.
Okay.
Yep.
And Gary, did you ever run any of his Fords or?
No, but I ran, when I ran Sportsman, I ran Chrysler products.
Yeah, I know. You cut up
Well,
that
they
good
were-
Mopar.
Yeah, while even with Sportsman, I had a Mopar.
Yeah.
And the gentleman, Joe Lapine from Danbury Competition, who built his Fords, built my Chrysler. So
John, did you ever feel that the Ford had an advantage or disadvantage at the Moody Mile?
Well, that year with that white car, I felt we had an advantage. That really had actually, Will Cagle drove that car and had a Winners Classic race at that time, where if you won one of the qualifying races, and there were 16 guys in the race, and Will wasn't, he didn't have a car there, but he said, well, let me take your car and run a lap, and I'll split the money with you. And so he did, and he come in and he says, I never drove a car like that. He says, boy, I wish I was driving that car. He says, man, that thing is really fast. And it was. It's just too bad it broke. But that was kind of my luck up there.
yeah.
First of all, I have a question for a guy sitting in the back. Jeff, do you have with you what I hope you have? Okay, if you'll make your way forward, then we'll take care of that in a minute. But Mike has just given me what's the date of this thing? September 3rd, the Post Standard called a page 2 section, and the headline is "Sad Finish for the Mile." And I don't know, are we about ready to wrap this up? Because this is going to wrap it up. Is that right, Kip? Well, at any rate, I'm going to keep going. Okay. I'll just read this fella has written here, talking about the beginning and the end of the racing on the mile at Syracuse. And this specifically is the beginning. The beginning, the Onondaga Historical Association has a letter in its files dated June 12, 1900, in which Timothy Woodruff, Lieutenant Governor to Theodore Roosevelt, urges Frederick Stevens, the future state senator, to get up an automobile race for the state fair. It's one of the biggest ever, and we could really make something out of this. That's a little paraphrase on the end. So that's what was going on in 1900. You know, all of you know what went on in 2015. So the beginning and the end. And if Jeff, where did he go? Joe, if you'll stall us for just a minute, I'll find Jeff Hackman and we'll take care of some other business here.
Well, I got to tell you, I think, guys, you did a great job representing a lot of the history of the Moody Mile. I mean, it's 2015, the checkered flag is out. The memories are there, and we're sure great that all of you folks have competed with. Hey, we got a question over here. Yes. There will be a Super Dirt Week, but it'll be at another speedway. The gentleman who is holding the cards on that is sitting to my left, and I'm not even going to look at him, but I'm going to say, yes, it will be done, because I've never known him to say no or never.
Did you want me to answer that, Joe?
Go ahead, answer it.
You'll be able to see racing on the dirt track no later than the 4th of July this year. And I tell you, I've told a lot of stories in the last 45 years, but I can guarantee you'll see racing by 4th of July on the new track and the new surface.
Gary? We have another question? Yes.
We were talking about so many unique cars. I was wondering what Glenn's thought was when he saw the blue car show.
That's a good question. You mean, this is before or after I had a long talk with our tech people? Well, the bottom line is we sent right, Don Bushbacker, who was our head tech people. He went out to, I think it was St. Louis, Missouri, where they were building the car. So he looked at it. The only thing he came back and said, look, all the cars that are on the circuit right now are built to the minimum specifications. Blue's car is going to be at the maximum. And it's a Lincoln Continental. And believe me, I couldn't find anything in the rule book that said you couldn't do it. And of course, the rest is history. They came, and after Merv Treichler, I mean, these are, in fact, Jeff Bodine was, yeah, remember, he won Daytona like 6 years later. But yeah, everyone, and if you were there on that Sunday, you saw a whole different field of cars. All of a sudden, they went from minimum specs to maximums. But yeah, that was one of the highlights of being at Syracuse. But you know, probably, which we don't talk about much, probably the spectacle at Syracuse that I probably look at and say, I mean, this was a real wow, was 73 and 4 when we had the USAC champ cars there. And there's where you saw the biggest names in motorsports. You know, Al Unser, Mario Andretti, Vukovic, Bettenhausen, Pancho Carter. I mean, these guys were the biggest and the best in the world. And you talk about a show, and this is where that's why even the track surface, it was prepared that we didn't run it in. Those champ cars run it in. And that's when Bettenhausen they were all Firestone tires at the time, and they were running inner outer liners, just like Cup cars do today. That's how far advanced that USAC, you know, champ division was back in the early 70s. But Bettenhausen got a flat going into turn one. I remember Merv Treichler and I were right there in turn one watching these guys. And it was incredible when the track was still heavy. It wasn't packed in. I mean, our modifieds wouldn't even go out on a track like this, you know, in today's game. These guys, you know, and the tires were huge. It wasn't like, and Alan, you remember back in those days when we were running the so-called drag rubber. And that's what these guys had. And he come flying down through there, dirt flying in the air, and he went into turn one, never lifted, and put it right in one of those buildings. And then 3 days later, Wes and I went up to see him in the hospital. And he'd been messed up ever since then but the night before, they were at Reading, Pennsylvania, running sprint cars, and here Bettenhausen had a broken nose from a rock or something that hit him in the face down at Reading. And he was running for Penske at the time, and Penske fired him because of the sprint car race instead. So, I mean, you know, these are things that, you know, you don't hear much about because they had a big fight between USAC and the champ cars, and it all went away right after that. But believe me, the best division that USAC had was that dirt champ division. When you saw all the top names in those cars and how that race. So I don't know if any of you people were there at the time, but to me it was an unbelievable experience to see the biggest names in racing run on dirt in those champ cars. Other than that, I'll tell you, I hope to turn the chapter next year and hope you all come to our new facility. I gave Wes a tour of it yesterday, and it's going to be, I'll guarantee it's going to be the wow factor when you come in and see what we're going to build up there. And hopefully it's a resurgence for Alan Johnson, who put on a hell of a lot of shows from that first show at Weedsport. And I'm not talking in a stock car. Right, Alan? It was snowmobile racing. His father and I were partners on an 800cc. Remember, Larry Berman drove it. because Alan was too young at that time to get on an 800 sled. But it's always been about speed. And every race that we went to at Syracuse, it was all about preparing the track to get the most speed out of it. And we didn't care what it cost or what you had to do. If there was something new or something we had to use on that track to get it, we would try and do it. And like I say, to put the modifieds, I mean, it was a real satisfaction when you could see a sprint car go around there in 24 seconds. And in today, the guys say it's too fast, you don't want to run there. But yet they came to rolling wheels and ran. And remember, their average speed there was 142 miles an hour. At Rolling Wheels this past October, they were averaging 145 miles an hour. So, but that's what racing's about. It's about, I don't care how you cut it. And like when Wes said it with 36 seconds, and then we were running in the 28-second bracket. I mean, these were satisfactions that you look for in motorsports. And I don't care whether it's Indianapolis, Syracuse, or the new track we're building. We're all looking to set the records. And some of the stuff that we want to do is, what we consider 21st century. And hey, let's wait and see what we have in the future. Right, Wes? And you talk about what Wes does in it. I ought to let him tell you. He's going to go out and work in the garage, putting the car together. Yeah. But it's not because he wants to do that. It's because, tell her what. Yeah. Why are you doing it?
Yeah. Well, you do it because you love it. And you love we're putting together a number 22 Billy Rafter coupe, a 36 Chevy coupe to go into the museum. And I just, doing it the old way, getting building parts, building brackets, and it's a labor of love. You do it. We go racing because we love the speed and the thrill and the competition, and you get in that garage and it's for the love. It's just for the love of racing.
But if Jackie was going to tell you, it's so that you get out of her hair and your wife's hair.
Yeah, that's it. They throw me out of the shop. They throw me out of the. I'm not allowed in the Christmas shop.
Gives away too many Christmas trees.
The one thing I'd like, I'm sorry, Gary. The one thing I'd like to say, during Glenn's regime for Super Dirt Week and building the empire that he did, there were some unsung heroes. Mark Koseski, one of the track maintenance people. Maury Holbrook, someone talked about him earlier. Track preparation was his thing. And I'm going to tell you, there were some secret ingredients used into the mile, right, Glenn, that made that track work and come up really good. One of the guys is here, right here, Jack Spino, who was always the man in Victory Circle and working the press booths and stuff like that. He was really good. And another guy who was a dear friend of Glenn and myself and many, many others, his nickname was the Chief. And when he was inducted into the Dirt Car Hall of Fame, I called him the Chief of Connections. One of the things we did not bring up, during the running of the big race, the 200s, halfway leader always got a $10,000 bonus. And that was all done and procured by this guy named Aaron Freshman. So it was a great team from the front to the back, left to right, and it really made Syracuse what it is and what it was.
Last October, just before the 200, I had the distinct privilege of introducing all the former champions of the race. At that time, there were 44 races had been run. By the time the day was over, 45 had been run. But there were 22 winners in those first 44. And after that race that day, there were still just 22 winners. But still, 22 winners. 450 drivers have qualified for and raced in the 200. Now, it had different names over the years. It was 100 to start with, and it was even called a 300, I think, at one point. But nonetheless, you all know what the race I'm talking about. But anyway, so we introduced all the drivers and gave them a jacket to be worn. some of you have read the story that Alan wasn't around for the introduction of that event, but it was a good thing because I had 22 jackets when I started the day, but by the time I ended, I had 21 jackets, and they were all on somebody. Alan's wife came up to me and wanted Alan's jacket, and I said, you aren't going to believe this, but I don't have it any longer. Apparently, somebody helped themselves to that jacket. So there were 22 jackets like this. There are now 23. If you see somebody wearing one like Alan's going to get here in a minute, and he doesn't look like anybody you know, he or she is probably a thief and has the jacket that Alan was to have received that day. But with that, I have the distinct privilege of presenting it. He didn't think he was ever going to get this, but nonetheless, we have the winner's champion jacket for Alan for his 3 wins on the Moody Mile.
And I think that pretty much wraps it up. Of course, we're going to be doing our afternoon session. Kip, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody on the panel. I sat down and I promptly realized that some of you may wonder, well, where is Brett Hearn? Well, Brett Hearn called me Thursday afternoon, had a personal problem he had to take care of. But Brett suggested that I give Gary Tompkins a call. And I am very glad I did, and I'm very glad that Gary said he would participate in this, because I thought Gary, in addition to everybody else here on the panel, was absolutely fabulous. I did not anticipate that we would have the Moody Mile guy here, and that is such a treat. And Mr. Donnelly, I'm so glad you were able to come. I'm going to maybe go out on a limb here, but I'll invite you and your crew back hopefully sometime in the spring. Maybe we can do another one of these conversations, and you can give us an update on Central New York Raceway Park so that we can all get geared up for for next year's season. But I just want to thank everybody that participated in the panel. I thought they were all fabulous. You need to give them a round of applause, if you would, please. I want to thank all of you for coming out. You've got about an hour now to grab lunch. We want to be back here at 1 o'clock because Mr. Montgomery, Mr. Murata, Mr. Tompkins will be around. Most of these other fellows have afternoon commitments and are probably going to have to take off. But gentlemen, there's a box of wine out here in the hallway. I would like each of you to take one as you leave, please. So anyway, I urge all of you to come back at 1 o'clock and we'll do our